staff will control their own mute buttons. Good practice would be to mute yourself if you are not speaking to avoid background noise and feedback. If a council member or staff wishes to speak, they will raise their hands, either literally or figuratively.
Mute buttons.
I will call the
Mute
member
yourself if you are not speaking.
clearly for our audio listeners. All of our meetings are recorded, as just evidenced. Both video and written transcriptions will be made available to the public on the city's website. Although we will not have public speaking tonight, you can sign up to speak at our monthly Common Council meetings. Please email Elissa Tinty to sign up by noon the day of the meeting, or you can submit written comment for the record by the same deadline. Our next Common Council meeting will be April the 6th. So that means if you want to speak, please get in touch with Elissa before noon of Tuesday, April 6th. The email address to do that is emtinty@kingston-ny.gov. You can also drop comments off at the drop box located outside the side door of City Hall. We also encourage you to reach out to committee chairs or your ward's representative at any time. Clerk Elissa Tinty is the moderator for today's meeting. She has the right to lock and pause the meeting to eject anyone who has behaved inappropriately. Lastly, at tonight's meeting, we have in attendance the members of the Finance Committee, Don Tollerman, Steve Shabbat, Michelle Hirsch, Tony Davis. We also have member of the Common Council, Jeffrey Ventura Morel. We have city staff, Elissa Tinty, as noted, Dan Gartenstein and Kevin Bryant, both of the Corporation Council, and John Toohey, who is our comptroller. We also have a couple of guests tonight to work us through the proposal for rezoning, creating a new zoning code in the city of Kingston. We thank you for your patience during these difficult times, and on behalf of the Common Council, I wish you and your family good health. I now call this meeting to order at 6:39. All right, thank you very much. In deference to our guests, Victor Dover and Joseph Cole, I hope it's okay with folks if we move the agenda around to go first with that. Oh, also, I see Amy Groves as well. Hello, Amy. Sorry for neglecting you there. If that's okay, Michelle Hirsch.
I'll make a motion to move the agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Second, all in favor? All right, very good. Thank you. So we will start now with the discussion of the rezoning proposal. The way we work this is the representatives of Dover Cole will give us an overview. We can ask questions of them. And then in order to ensure that the council wants to have a discussion, we'll have a motion and hopefully a second. We'll have discussion amongst ourselves. If you all could stay though for a little bit of that, so that if we do have questions in the process of our discussion, it'd be most helpful if we could ask you. All right, great. Thank you very much. So take it away. If you'll introduce yourselves as you get started so we can tell your voices, put them together with your faces.
Great. Well, thank you for having us here. I'm Amy Groves with Dover Cole & Partners, project director. As you mentioned, I'm here with Victor Dover and Joseph Cole is also on the line, available for questions. And I'm trying to share my screen and it's telling me it's disabled. Is there someone that can make me able to share my screen?
That would be Elissa Tinty.
Okay. We have a short, about 15-minute presentation just to go through, our proposal, and then expect to have some time and eager to talk with y'all about any questions you have.
Great. So Elissa, can you make it possible for Amy to share her screen?
So not yet.
Yeah, I can't do it. It's up to the host, and that's Elissa. Elissa, are you there?
Yes.
Do you have that power to make it possible for Amy to share her screen?
I'm trying to figure it out. Oh,
Alyssa, this is Sue. You just make her a co-host.
okay. Do I go into the, how do I do that?
If you look at participants, in the list of participants, you'll see her name.
Okay.
Okay. If you kind of hover over her name, you're going to see a couple of options. And there's one at the far right. If you click on that, and it should put a drop-down screen to make her a co-host.
And this is Amy G, correct?
Correct.
Not to be confused with
Okay.
Alex.
All right. She should have it now.
Okay, great. Let me know when y'all can see my screen.
It's up, Amy.
Great.
Yes.
Y'all can see it.
Oh. Believe it or not, I'll start off there. I am actually from New York. I grew up near Poughkeepsie, so I'm very familiar with the Hudson Valley, but I did spend a lot of time in grad school in Virginia, and I think that's where I picked up the y'all. So I'll have to excuse me for that. So I'm here today where Victor and I are representing actually a team of consultants. Victor will tell you a bit about Dover Coal, but I'm going to start out just to let you know about the others who are on our team. So that includes the LaBerge Group, who are a New York State land use and planning firm who have expertise and lots of experience implementing form-based codes in New York. The Land Use Law Center, who are based in the Hudson Valley and are going to assist with integrating the code into the regulatory framework and any legal questions. Hall Planning and Engineering is Rick Hall is a transportation consultant we work with all over the country whose expertise is in designing complete walkable streets. And then we have Gridix, who have an interactive online platform that we're going to use for the code. And with that, I'm going to let Victor give an introduction.
Well, our favorite kind of work is this kind of project. Just want you to know it's perfectly matched to the sort of work that we like to do the best. And the first thing we do when we help existing towns resume and work on their codes to get more in sync with the place that they are and the place that they want to be is do a lot of looking and listening. And so as we first visited before the pandemic in person in Kingston and got to look around at the historic place, not just at the high streets or main streets, but at the residential fabric around them and the sense of history there, we became really inspired. It's for us, looking at your place carefully and talking to you about it is how we pull out the DNA, the good genetic material, the code, if you will, from which better regulations are formed. So we started that looking, and then we, of course, abruptly had to stop that, and it was heartbreaking for us because we were really looking forward to getting started on it. So now we get a chance to resume that work virtually and in person in time, and we're really looking forward to it. Now, the first thing we discovered was the vast number of non-conforming conditions in which existing properties don't match up with the zoning rules. So in the end, one of the key things we can do is re-enable the traditional Kingston to make it legal to build more of what's really great about your town. Next, Amy. So I'll just talk a little bit about how it works as an introduction. We do get to work on a range of scales from the region down to building architecture and street design, individual neighborhoods. Very often we're called upon to help communities change their land development regulations. Next. That involves thinking about all the scales at once, because in the end, there are three key themes to this. One is designing very publicly and transparently. We call the consensus building project that is ongoing, a technique of design in public. Second is visualizing change before it occurs, because while land development regulations have a lot of words and numbers and charts and things in them, in the end, the most important thing is what will this town feel like and what about it will attract investment and reinvestment, and protection and innovation. And then third, starting from the beginning with the end in mind, how do we make the place, how do we make it not just a vision on paper or good sounding rules that no one uses, but actually get put to work, right away and gradually over time, helping you make changes for the better. So the design in public process, as I described it, is really about trusting people to know a lot about their town, to give us a high-speed briefing, bringing us up to speed very quickly about the place that's there, and using design as a way of learning from people about what's important to them. That way, you don't just make rules, but you make rules that reflect your community's values. So that means turning the microphone over to people, handing the pencil to people, and then we take it back and draw something and say, is this what you meant? Next. So there's a little bit of lag, just so you know. Another theme in our work is that the public spaces between the buildings are as important as the tightly regulated private development that shapes those spaces on its flank. This is a street where we had the opportunity to redesign the public right-of-way. Amy is going to shock you with a before picture, for which the party in the street you see here is the after. It used to look like that. Which was just another road that had been turned into a forgettable highway. And by thinking about the rules for buildings while we are also thinking about the details of street design, you can actually get the public and private components of your built environment in sync with one another. Next. So that includes places where we're restoring or working on neighborhoods that are already started. It includes working on places that are just growing up for the first time. So it's a brand new street, you can tell from the tiny trees. But that good DNA from the historic town was what we used to explain why the street needed to be narrow and slow and safe. That's a far narrower street than, say, Davidson, North Carolina, where we took that picture on one of our projects would normally allow. Next. So the next theme is places, really. You're looking at a picture of Glenwood Park in Atlanta, where the new neighborhood grew on a site that had been eaten away at or eroded from the city fabric for industrial purposes in the past. That was cleaned up and put back to work. And now there are jobs in there. There's a lot of people living there and a whole variety of housing. And the emphasis is on the experience you have in the spaces between buildings. I'm proud to say that over the past decade and a half, every major textbook about city planning and urban design has somehow featured our work, or had a chapter written by us, or had one of our projects on the cover. And then my buddy John Massengale, New York architect, and I got to collaborate on a big fat textbook on street design. So a lot of what I was just talking to you about is in there. I always joke that we don't want people just to buy a copy. We want them to buy 100 copies, pass them out to all their friends. And I hope you will. Thanks. Now, the code is where it all comes to head, because in the end, the rules are what determine whether people operate on their good habits or their bad habits, and whether new development is a good neighbor to existing development. Believe it or not, you're not looking at a historic street. Well, it's an old plat, what was an old vacant lot, but those houses are relatively recently built. That's in the little town of Port Royal, South Carolina, waterfront town, much like yours. In what they did in Port Royal after changing the code was build houses that had the components and the familiar grammar of good buildings from their past, like the front porches facing the street. Next. So that's an example of a success story that's not in a big city or in a big expensive form. A lot of our focus is on helping communities revive their tradition of building so-called missing middle housing. All those housing types that are in between the big condo project or apartment complex on one end of the spectrum, or the single family detached house on a large lot at the other. Call it the missing middle because all those other forms, like small lots and cottage courts and duplexes and row houses and small apartment buildings, have gone largely unimplemented, at least in the second half of the 20th century. They're coming back now because of code reform of exactly the kinds that you're doing that allow for naturally occurring affordable housing. So that's something that's on our mind. People always ask me and Joe, well, if missing middle housing is so cool, then what's preventing it? And the answer is there are a lot of things that are preventing it, but I will just ask you to focus on a few of them. The main answer is the zoning. The most important impediment to missing middle housing, if that's something that's important to your community, is almost always found in the land development regulations. So finding out how you want your place to be as it continues for a few more centuries, and what it wants to be when it grows up, let's say, is what we're looking for, and how we fix the zoning either makes that possible or impossible. Next.
Go ahead. I was going to say, at Dover Cole, we have a really wide range of form-based coding experience, and it includes working in places where historic preservation is the goal, where downtowns looking to revitalize, or corridors that are really looking to transform. But really in all of them, there's our process is very similar, where we like to start out first by working with the community to visualize what they want future development to look like, and thinking about how the area can change over time, and how to get, and then writing the rules to fit that development. So I'm going to talk about one case study, and then we'll talk a bit about the process that we proposed here for Kingston. So this is Columbia Pike in Arlington County. So it's a very different scale, obviously, than Kingston. It's the Metro DC area, but it has some really interesting implementation results, and we wanted to share with you. So the big ideas behind the code is that, implementing the community vision. They wanted to get the corridor transit ready, have a walkable form, and have a mix of uses, and streamline the approval process, make it easier for people to do development the way that the vision saw it. And then also looking to have affordable housing. So, that was one of their top priorities. They wanted to make sure that the people living in the corridor could continue to live in the corridor the way that the vision saw it in the future. So we started looking at the mixed use nodes. And so these were the kind of the main intersections along the corridor. They were, it was a very auto-oriented corridor, it was strictly commercial uses, and lots of empty buildings and parking lots. And so we looked at what the vision could be for a mix of uses, and then we translated that vision to a regulating plan and form-based code. And by the early 2010, you can see this photo, there was a number of new buildings sprouting up along the corridor that fit the vision, the buildings up at the back end of the sidewalk, mixed use, transit-oriented design. And then after the implementation, or after the nodes, we then looked at the neighborhood areas in between, and did a master plan and code for those areas. And the county's been tracking the number of projects that have come forward under the code. Since 2003, there's been 1,500 residential units and over 300,000 square feet of commercial space, which included 200 committed affordable units. And there's a number of sites in the approvals and construction process. And this quote from an interview, you see it's from 2012. So we need to get a more current code, because we're sure the numbers are extremely out of date, but just we'd like to look back and see, what does the code mean, and what did it mean to the county? And so for the county, it meant, $5 million per year in tax revenue, and with the new developments coming online, figuring 10 million every year. So, really thinking about what the return of investment was for the county for looking at this code. Another interesting way to look at value is these visuals that Joe Minicozzi from Urban 3 does. If you've seen these before, but the spikes are basically a visualization of land value per acre. So this is looking at Charleston, South Carolina. So you can see the historic core of Charleston, South Carolina has very high taxable land value, as well as the waterfront area. But what we find interesting is, looking at the suburban areas surrounding that, the spikes are much shorter, except for the one spike that you see in the area circled in yellow. And that happens to be a neighborhood that Dover Cole designed. And this is what it looks like. And it was based on the historic precedents of, that you see in Charleston, looking at really the design of the buildings, how the buildings relate to the street, making places that people love where they want to be, And it created that change in value. The land uses are exactly the same. They're single family housing, the same as the surrounding neighborhoods. But looking at the design of the streets and the buildings created that difference that was reflected in the value. So looking at the process that we proposed to update the code, and I'm going to go through this quick, and then we'll have some time for questions. But really, we want to start with a review of your existing regulations. Really, understand how they work. Our team will come and for on-site analysis, study the neighborhoods. We always start with stakeholder interviews, community groups, property owners, developers. We want to understand what's going on. We used to come and sit in a conference room all day and do them, but over the last year, we've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings like these. And it's actually, we find more convenient for busy people sometimes to just drop in on Zoom and talk with us. So we found that's pretty effective. And of course, we'll be getting up to speed on all of the comp plan and the existing city plans and projects so that we are fully briefed on everything that's going on or that is underway in the city. And then we'll work with the city to design the best methods of outreach. We want to reach out to the community and make sure they know what's going on and are able to participate and give feedback throughout the process. And so, we wrote this proposal in late 2019, and we envisioned the centerpiece of the public involvement process would be a charrette that looked like this. And so our charrettes would have, many meetings, big group meetings, smaller focus group meetings, and, lots of opportunities for people to drop in and see ideas in progress and tell us if that vision that we're drawing is on the right track. But, over the last year, that has changed. But we still do, a similar process. We pivoted to having, focusing a lot of these events online, having large Zoom meetings of a couple hundred people where we then break out into breakout groups with 5 or 6 people to talk with them about, what they want to see. We have drop-in Zoom sessions with our planners so that folks can drop in at scheduled times and see, ideas in progress and talk with them about what they're drawing. And more videos and recorded presentations that are online and are available to people at any time. So here's a short list of some of the tools we've been using. There's lots, and we've been experimenting with different types of websites. Zoom tends to be the go-to for meetings. After the beginning of the year, there was some experimenting with others, but lots of folks seem comfortable with that. We did do a telephone town hall, interestingly, for our project. So that was a low barrier for engagement for folks who if you're worried about the having online access. The telephone town hall was an interesting way. Just needed a phone to participate and have we were able to do polling through the phone. So it was an interesting way to do a kickoff meeting. So the thing that won't change is that we'll be designing the process to get the feedback we need. So we'll be, through those initial stakeholder meetings, we'll figure out what the critical issues are and then design exercises during the charrette to get feedback on those specific topics, be it street design or, design of certain areas, neighborhood design, and get that feedback through these community events. And at the end of the charrette, we would have some drawings that show the key ideas for key spaces, public spaces, streets, and as well as some draft ideas for the code. So then taking all the feedback from the charrette and that work in progress presentation and the additional feedback we get, we'll then draft the code. We'll have a regulating plan that drafts out the districts or character areas, and then pages like these that have the metrics and the measurements. The code would include street standards. That's a little different than standard zoning, where we're thinking about the buildings and the public spaces together, and as well as basic architectural standards, requiring no blank walls and designing for pedestrians. So we'll work with our team members and Gridix to then get the code online. So it'll be in an interactive format with a map that you can click and get and see what the new standards are. And interestingly, they have a software called Zone IQ where they can take our new standards and you can actually visualize them in basic massing models. So we can use that during code testing workshops. So we can check in with people to see if the code's on the right track or what areas we need to tweak. And then finally, at the end of the process, we wrap up with the approvals and staff and official training. And really the goal is, by having this process being very transparent and lots of public involvement throughout, by the end we'll have lots of kind of shared understanding of how we got to where we are, and support for the code. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll take your questions. But I just want to say, we are again, thankful for being here tonight. And we're, there's many different ways that we can, as I mentioned, approach, going about public involvement. And we look forward to, working with you all to tailor that to best meet the needs and budget and calendar of the city.
I'd just like to reiterate Amy's final point, which is flexibility is key. We'll be flexible. There, for everything we just talked about, there are probably 2 or 3 different ways to do it. We've probably done them, each one of them, a couple of times, and can talk about pros and cons and where to save or where not to scrimp. And so happy to go through all that with you.
Great. Thank you very much for that presentation. I really found it enjoyable. I grew up just south of Davidson, so I was really impressed to see the changes there. Any members of the committee have questions at this point? Don Tollerman?
Hey guys, thanks for the presentation. Did you discuss pricing with the mayor? And because I know you had last year, and I wonder if there had been subsequent conversations.
So we did. We submitted the original cost proposal with the RFP, and then there was some initial outreach during the year, asking about how we might be able, what the impacts of the pandemic might mean to pricing. And so we spoke a bit about that, and happy to get into more details with y'all tonight. I think our key takeaway is that as we have to do the pivot to online engagement, it meant that some of the costs and things that we originally scoped out would happen a little differently. But there were definitely trade-offs, like, for example, less travel costs involved, but we found a lot of our projects needed more in-depth websites or other things to support the online engagement. So I think as we scope together to finalize that, I think we just need to be able to work together. But there's definitely going to be some trade-offs as we look at approaching the project a little differently.
Oh, plus, if we're coming to a vaccinated population, you may want to go back to more in-person meetings.
Which would be great.
Or
we're right there with
meetings. Yeah.
So then
hybrid meetings that have folks in person and online. And so I think as you're right, as more and more people get vaccinated, probably the situation will continue to change.
So the conversation about pricing, that maybe it would come down a little bit, that would be a conversation we'd have to have because things are so fluid.
It's also possible to phase this work a bit and plan ahead for pausing midway or 3/4 of the way and talking about how best to complete the final phase. If, for example, less virtual, more in person is feasible, we'd be right there with you on doing that. And I think so you can count on flexibility from us as we go along, not just at the very beginning. But we're going to be learning as we go. Also, your community has a ton of experience with using backups and alternative techniques like this meeting, more experience than most because of the early spike. And so I think when you say you want an in-person meeting, we're going to know you've already exhausted all the possibilities of doing it a cheaper way virtually. Well, there are some advantages to virtual that we don't want to lose. So in the future, I suspect we'll always do a combo of the two, even with vaccinations.
I think we all are experiencing a little Zoom exhaustion.
Sure.
Here, but how long do you think this process, okay, I'll hold you to it. Exactly how many days will this process take? Whatever you say, we're going to hold you to.
From the first adoption discussion meeting or at the very...
from the time we say, let's go.
Yeah, and once you talk about how long it takes to get us all the way to a final revised draft, and then that's probably the most relevant date.
Yes.
So, I mean, the original proposal, we estimated about a year. And so that again, we can go faster or slower. The key thing is the review. So I think we can get to a first draft. I think we estimated the charrette would be around month 3 or 4 because we want to have some time up front to do that analysis and stakeholder interviews. So maybe the 3rd month would have the charrette. By month 6, we would have the draft code. But then from there, there's time for code refinement and testing and really review cycles. And so how long those take, really impact how much the overall timeline expands.
But it could take a year and a half, I'm guessing, sometimes, or more.
It could, or it could go faster. It really depends, again, on how quickly they're able to do review and get feedback.
I have a couple of rules of thumb I use, and Amy's heard me say this so many times. Don't roll your eyes, Amy, but I am going to say it one more time. As public a process as you can stand, and as fast as you can stand without giving people whiplash from going from 1st gear to 4th gear. If you want to go faster and you're comfortable moving faster, we'll speed up to match you. The important thing is just not go so fast that anyone feels you've railroaded the decision making or you haven't given time enough for everyone to participate that needs to. So we want you to go fast enough for it to be a satisfying process for everybody, but not so fast that you feel like you skipped a step.
So I assume that we would need to have a sort of a quarterback on our side to be the liaison, to organize, and to continually communicate.
That really helps. Yes.
It's got to happen, but how much of a commitment is that? That seems like that could be, like, I'm trying to think of how many hours it would take one of our people. Could be like 5, 6, 7 hours a week, right?
Well, if you talk about the behind the scenes work, interacting with us and all of you and that sort of thing, it could easily be that much. If you add to that public events where this key person or quarterback would be on the scene for those right alongside yourselves and ourselves, then more than that. But I think that's not too unusual. I want you to think about what we're doing here, since it's been 50 years since you revised the code, as kind of like a historic moment in the life of the community. It's not a place to as I said, skip a step or scrimp on staff involvement, for example, because it's a really big deal. It can make a big difference in people's lives. So we want to get it absolutely right. But many of the examples I showed, like the little town of Port Royal and other places where we've done these processes successfully, have either barely had any full-time planning staff or haven't had any full-time planning staff. Sometimes, Amy talked about Columbia Pike, a big city in Arlington is, and they have a big sophisticated staff. So they're at the other end of the spectrum. But we're assuming that there's going to be a kind of a partnership. We become an extension of your staff, and we'll work with whomever you designate as that quarterback to, between them and us, get it all done.
Great, thank you.
For the record, it's been 58 years, by the way. 58 years since we did the code.
Steve Shabbat, then Tony Davis.
I have to say I'm 58 years old. That's really a long time. I also grew up south of Davidson in Mecklenburg County.
Oh.
Okay, thanks, Rennie. I'm trying to think how to phrase these. Actually, thankfully, one of my questions has already been answered. And I want to phrase these. I don't want to sound like a wise guy here or anything like that. So bear with me. You guys have the experience here. Number one, by your own admission here, number one on your list of pros and cons is the expense of this, which I'm sure is going to be substantial. However, we go down a little and, we're going to see some savings, with time spent or anything. Are the savings we're going to realize, will they justify the large outlay of expense in the beginning? And if so, how long is that going to take us, to see a tipping point? Okay, and last but not least, and I'll leave it up to you guys who wants to answer what. And again, not to sound like a wise guy, but I'm listening to this and it sounds really cool, and I'm loving all the graphics and the building up and all that stuff. So when push comes to shove, I have a feeling, this is not going to be like Field of Dreams where if we build it, they'll come. I mean, we're going to still have to do the bulk of the heavy lifting, to get developers in here and, get projects initiated. They're not going to just say, oh, hey, by the way, I heard what's going on in Kingston. Let's go build a big skyscraper there. I don't think it's going to work like that. So how have you found that word gets out and, people really want to start working with a community that has adopted some new laws to make it easier?
Amy and Joe, is it okay if I start, and if you two want to add on at the after that, please do it. There are a lot of questions there, Stephen, but I think I understood the general thrust of it. First, by our own admission, we were wondering who wrote the pros and cons document that was attached to your agenda. So that wasn't us.
Oh, okay.
Although I didn't think it was wrong, it is a big outlay, and this is not an inexpensive process. We are constantly looking for ways to make it more affordable for more towns because the work is so important and it gets postponed. That's why it's been so long since your code had an overhaul, without a doubt. So there are a few ways to think about the return on investment for this. First is like an insurance policy. You're trying to get your codes right so that you get more of what you do want and less of what you don't want. And every community has the latest newspaper headlines about an outrageous project that the community feels is out of scale or out of character. That tends to happen when the code is unclear about what you're going to accept, or when developers and their architects don't get a clear message about what the community wants before they show up and they say, well, here's our great idea. What do you think? So the first place it starts to return for you is by steering investors, whether they're local and active already or they're coming from somewhere else, toward the thing that you want. And that's why the visual basis of a code, those graphics you talked about, a form-based code is really good at this. Old-fashioned zoning is not as good at this. So that's the first place it starts to pay back. The second, I think, is the confidence building process that goes from both doing the planning and confirming your vision and from updating your rules. Because you're not just sending messages to developers from far away. You're also sending messages to local people, and they might not have a giant lot. You think about it like this. A good form-based code should be pretty simple. I like to say somebody who has a 25-foot wide lot on Front Street should be able to, that owns a barber shop, should be able to read the code and figure out within a reasonable amount of time and without an engineer or a lawyer what they're permitted to do and what they're not, or at least what is being encouraged by the code. If you've got that, then you've got a good code, and it'll pay back not just with high-flying investors from out of town, but with people who are there already, who already have a commitment to the place and want to make small improvements, incremental development. Last, you have a lot of underutilized properties that are small. These may not be so attractive to someone from far away who's going to fly in with buckets of money, but they could be great wealth creation opportunities for households and small businesses that are already there. So a good code will also unlock some of that investment. Because if the code is mysterious, or to do the right thing, you have to go ask for a wheelbarrow load of variances or what have you, special exceptions or rezonings, the small investors are going to be turned off or turned away by that. And you really want to enable a much wider range of participants to get in on the land development business. In fact, the whole idea that there's a professional class of developers who just do that is a relatively new invention. It used to be people who just, owned businesses or owned buildings and got with architects and did projects. And only the mega scale really makes sense for, the specialist from out of town. Now, since I've mentioned them, I should say this. When you get your code right, you'll be on the map for that class of developer that wants to build traditional walkable urbanism, the walkable streets, the historical city, the traditional building to street relationships, quality architecture. So you'd be much more likely to attract them when you've already set up the rules. So it's possible to come in and do all those right things with an as of right or by right development project that requires minimal guessing and has lots of certainty. Uncertainty is the enemy of reinvestment. So this is the big way that code reform can give more predictability to investors, and small and large, local and far away. But you will find that with a good form-based code, people come to Kingston who would otherwise would have skipped over it and gone somewhere else, because they got the message that you are setting yourselves up for business, as long as the thing they want to come do is in keeping with your community's vision. Meanwhile, you will also scare away a lot of developers who are wasting your time, or tire kickers, or people who want to do really harmful things, suburban sprawl or out of scale development. They will be turned off by a good code, and as it should be. So those are just some thoughts I have. Joe?
Well, one of the things is that there's a lot of things you can't really quantify. So the cool thing with form-based codes, as we've discovered, is it does attract, it does make possible a place where a family or an individual could live with one less of their automobile. So that affects their transportation costs, perhaps. But that sense of community that you get from a walkable place, that's vibrant, actually, that has other people like yourself living there and working there, builds that sense of community. What's that worth? That translates to desirability, improves the tax base. It gets people to stay into the community that might otherwise want to leave. It promotes local self-sustainability, because you're supporting your own businesses. And so that's really hard to put a price tag on. And really, if you want to count dollars, probably the first application, the first development that would get built, you would see a benefit that would far exceed our entire fees for the entire project. Because some of the examples Amy's showing is like millions of dollars of investment came into the community, and we weren't paid $1 million even.
She skipped this detail, but Columbia Pike, for example, had been skipped over by investors for 30 years. Everybody was building things in North Arlington County and nobody on Columbia Pike. 30 years with nothing but the occasional building getting torn down to make room for another used car lot. And then as soon as the code was changed, investment flowed toward that area that had the better code. All because of the certainty principle.
Great. Anything else there, Steve? Okay, Tony's next, then Michelle.
Hello there, Tony Davis here. And I got several questions that might be repetitive, but let's see here. And first off, and what is the expense? And we've been talking about that. You guys were here before. And can you tell me what the expense is this? What is the price tag? Or is that being renegotiated?
Sure. No, I think it's in the letter that's in the agenda. But the cost was the original proposal was $469,000 plus the reimbursable expenses was right around $499,000. That was for the entire study with the expenses.
So $499,000. Mm-hmm. So $500,000. All right. So that's what the expense is. And B, how much research data have you guys already completed or started prior to COVID? And I see those pictures that were taken in our community.
Right. Well, we did that initial research, and it was really just a skimming of the surface. We just looking and getting to know the place before our interview, but that was at no expense to the city, just something we did on our own. I will say partly because we want to be well prepared when we come to an interview, and also because we love the great American town, and you have one. And so I came away with a treasure chest full of photographs of your town that I've already used in half a dozen others to show how cities can be. And that I think is kind of common for us. We always start before we're ready, and we haven't had a contract or billed anybody for anything yet.
So you haven't really started any research or data per se?
No, after we were selected after the interview, the project was just put on ice because we all just went into the uncertainty of 2020. And I think it was the right move, especially given the timing. So now it's just a matter of saying, okay, what would we do differently a year later? What, if anything, could be phased or broken off to trim costs? I think that's a reasonable question to ask. We are always, Tony, having to do a little bit of guessing in the dark when we approach a proposal like this, because we're reading your request for proposals and what's written in there, guessing what's written between the lines, but we're not really having detailed conversations with you or able to ask because of the probity laws, and it's reasonable. You drop that cone of silence when you send out a request for qualifications. So we took a stab at it, but it is just that. It is a way we could do it. There's certainly opportunity to add something, subtract something, ship something. And I even suggested earlier tonight, I think it might be a good idea, that we break our work into phases that have discrete cost and give you a chance to work through, pause, meet with us, confirm and refine the scope and fee or for the remaining phases. That's a flexibility we're willing to give you because we think you'll be excited about it, and you'll still, you'll want to move forward through those processes as we go.
All right, 3 more questions and 3 more parts. C, street design. In your presentation, you talked about street design. So is that something that you guys really haven't looked at yet? And my second part of that question is, and what is some of the thoughts on street design, if you had that yet?
Amy, do you want to talk? We got as far between you and me as when they're reviewing the request for proposals and studying the town on Google Earth before we showed up in person and started measuring things and taking pictures, to say to ourselves, we should add Rick Hall to this team and we should put street standards in our recommended table of contents for this code. That's how far I got. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, so I think, we are, at the beginning, we as Victor mentioned, we've, had a chance to, start to get familiar with the town, but we really need to, to spend a lot more time to give you any, specific feedback on specific streets. We're not quite there yet, but we do anticipate the code would have, street standards, and that's just something that's, different from, standard zoning, but different in form-based codes, because we're really thinking about the public spaces. And so the code will be, specifying, the width of sidewalks, the width of travel lanes, the, how to do street trees, when to do street trees, where bike facilities go. And so we would have, street standards that kind of give that direction. So that way, when future street improvements come along, there's, a playbook in place so that the street design fits with the context of the land uses around it.
I would just say that there's one subject area where I'm grateful that we have a lot of experience in New York State, and we've worked closely with NYSDOT. We've worked with NYSERDA. We've worked on Long Island. We've worked in Western New York and Amherst. We've worked in upstate New York and Albany and Clifton Park and Schodack. And so while we're new to Kingston, we're not new to the New York transportation planning and traffic engineering regime. We're familiar with how things work.
Well, the follow-up to that, then, so I still have to do the question, is that right now we're in the middle of improving our main corridor, Broadway, and with street and new things. So that is probably going to be done before you guys give us the final plan. And so how would that work? I mean, if we're doing Broadway over and we're talking about new trees, shrubbery, we're talking about new bike lanes, new road configuration.
Glad to hear it.
Would you be studying that as well, or implementing that, even though we've already started the process?
Well, remember, the street improvements you're making inside the right-of-way in the public land of the road are one thing, and the regulations that apply to the private land on either side is a second thing. And we've got to do the second thing as part of this code writing process. So we're not going to want to, but nor would we ignore Broadway at all. But we don't have to reinvent the wheel. You already have a project underway. You probably have 3 other projects underway we haven't heard about yet. We hadn't heard about that one. And that's perfectly normal. I think as we go, what we'll also discover is places where if the fabric of the town has been interrupted or severed or broken in some way, and repairs will take place, we can set the standards for the street links that will re-put the grid together, or that kind of thing. That often happens in transitioning areas where industrial uses or large-scale uses have moved on, but the land is being repurposed. That's when things like, what are the standards for new streets, become important questions.
Okay. And again, I promise these should be the two last questions here. And community opposition in the presentation in community opposition, what has been your track record in overcoming this, and how do you overcome that? And with, community opposition.
Well, we all three have to take a crack at that one because I want to hear what Joe and Amy will say about it. But I'll say this: the most important tools we have, and by we I mean yourselves and ourselves and the mayor and the staff. That's the we. The most important tools we have for building trust are to tell the truth and do what we said we're going to do. People are always nervous about change, and so the opposition you're talking about could be an instinctive, could come up. That comes up often. Could come up as in response to an instinctive feeling that change or growth might make things worse rather than better. So as long as we understand that and we're addressing it head on, then and we show it, we explain it, and we explain it carefully and truthfully, and we do what we said we're going to do, you can overcome a lot of it. You can't make opposition go away, and I'm not even sure you want to. It's actually kind of helpful and ventilating to a process to have somebody put all of us, the we again, all yourselves and ourselves, through our paces to make sure we've thought it through. Because opposition tends to be asking what if questions. What if, but the worst case scenario? Or what if this happens? What if that happens? Are you ready for that? And to the extent they tell us those questions early on, they're arming us with information about what we need to go research and what we need to be ready to answer. So that will help. There is no magic bullet that will cause that instinctive suspicion or fear of change to completely go away. And of course, the power of political leadership, you all embody that, is a great antidote for it as well. That's when one of you stands up and says, we on the Common Council are watching this really closely, and I appreciate what you said, and we are listening and we're taking it into account. And they hear you say that and feel included and seen and heard. That's really crucial. But since there's no magic bullet that will make it ever completely go away, in the end, you will have to decide. There's a stage we're in at the beginning, most of this contract, in which we as technicians are doing a draft. We're writing things up, and we're putting it to you and saying, is this what you meant? You, the Common Council, you, the administration, is this what you meant? And you're confirming, we're revising, and we get it at a certain point. We hand it to you, and then you have to take a vote or votes to make it the law of the land. And at that point, we change. We're just the scriveners at that moment, and you are the authors. And so that's why, Tony, the best tool for overcoming opposition or doubt, fear, is for you all to be really informed and able to explain the things that people are confused or worried about, not just having us do it. One last thing I'll say, we are experienced at all this, dare say experts on doing the community outreach, on doing the visualization, planning the town, or writing the code. But we're not a public relations firm. You're not hiring us as lobbyists to convince people. We'd rather explain, or educate, and listen and adjust. There's no selling to be done here, because in the end, you, the Common Council, are going to decide what the rules are. We may actually have 14 great ideas to suggest to you, and you only act on 12 of them. I think I will sleep well at night knowing that you listened to all 14 and you did the ones you felt were right for Kingston.
All right.
Amy, did Amy and Joe, you were nodding in agreement with me a little bit there. Does what I said match?
You covered a lot of bases, but being someone who always tests everything, what's the worst that can go wrong? Like Victor said, there's more than just one thing that we're talking about here. So we're going to reach success in some aspects. there are people who you just simply can't convince based on something that happened to them in the past. We try to figure out what that is and analyze it and counter it, and just sometimes it doesn't work. And so usually they're in a minority and are already known as the town troublemaker. Then the other thing is that I lost that last one. What was the other one?
Well, Tony said he had one more question.
Blank. Yeah, there's like one other worst case scenario, but again, it's usually finding out what like Victor was saying, listening to what people are saying, and once we can convince them that we're actually listening, that we're writing down what they're saying, that we're pointing out in a presentation that this was a concern and this is how the code addresses it now, usually gives us builds a real consensus, that's what we're after.
All righty. Thank you. And then just for time restraints, and I appreciate you guys answering. I'll just hold off on my last question. Hopefully somebody else will ask that. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Michelle Hirsch.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for being here. I just want to say that, I've read through all of the materials and sort of looking over some of the other projects that your agency has done. And it just struck me that this is a $500,000 project and the city of Kingston is only 8.7 square miles with a population of 23,000 people. And a lot of the other projects that you have done for less money has larger populations, larger square, the whole area is much larger in area, the square mileage. So just curious as to why the proposal that you've given us is the $500,000, say, compared to even $298 for, rezone Albany, the town of Babylon, things like that. So if you could speak to that.
And Amy, I'll start with Albany because I was involved there. Actually, that was our share of a much, much larger contract for rezone Albany. We were subs to Clarion Associates, a law firm and planning firm that took the majority of the work to be done there. And so our part of rezone Albany was only that much, but someone else was doing a lot of things on a separate contract and price tag that we have to do here under all one umbrella. So that's just the difference between rezone Albany and this one.
Okay. And then the town of Babylon, that was $400,000.
Right, tiny area.
114 square feet, and again, we're 8.7.
No, the town of Babylon area that we worked on in East Farmingdale was microscopic compared to the extent of your geography. And the size of the town does matter because we want to get up to speed on every neighborhood, really understand every place as we go. So that's a factor. Mm-hmm. But there's also a depth factor where what are the things we expect will happen in terms of the need for extra meetings or the need for extra drawings. In a way, what we're doing here is taking all the other experiences we've had and thinking about what will probably happen and making our best guess at what will happen will take this many days or hours times this many hours, hourly rate equals this many dollars. It's not, we're doing that based on a lot of experience, but it is difficult to know exactly what's going to come up in your case. And that's why I said what I did about there being some potential for savings if it's all going smoothly and quickly, and there aren't the need for as many detours or extras or redos or that kind of thing as sometimes happens. This is a feedback process where you do a little and you learn a little and then we really find out how hard the next thing is going to be to do.
So how do you ensure that the final product is representative of the community as a whole, rather than a reflection of the opinions of the people who show up and participate?
I like that question. But But do you mind if we finish answering the one about the fees first? Amy, did you look like you wanted to add to a little bit to what's included in the fee? So you could explain why it is that much. And I would like you to do that first, and then I'll take a crack at Michelle's second question.
Right, sure. I think you hit on a lot of it. Mentioning the size of the study areas were, they weren't citywide codes. They were, unique corridors or certain areas where we were writing the codes. That's one thing. Another thing is just the team members. And so one thing that was included in this proposal that wasn't included in many of those other ones was the Gridix online platform, which is really cool and I think really innovative and useful, but it's also just something that's not just writing the code. It's also, so I think that was, itemized out in our cost proposal to y'all, and that is an additional, cost, but I think it's valuable. Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, so it depends on, the scope of the work that's requested. And so that's something that's a little different here.
So is the Gridix something that we then will we own, or we have to license after the project is done?
So it's the cost includes the use throughout the project, and then I believe there's a yearly subscription fee, but that the city would have access to making edits directly and interfacing. So it's the same as any other online platform. I can get y'all. I don't have it on top of my head what that is, but I don't think it's a large fee, but there is a fee that they have to provide technical support if needed, but the city would basically be able to run it and make changes to it directly.
Most local governments use Municipal Code Corporation or General Code or one of these services that these days are websites in themselves. And Gridix is a new and more interesting alternative to those old standbys. And we hope you're excited about it, because even though there's a breakout cost for it, in the end, we think it'll be more useful to people, because it's not just a transferring to the web of something that used to be on paper, 58 years ago, but really is a dynamic and interactive web-based way of communicating this work. Seems like the right thing to do for the 21st century and all. Now, on the participation, you asked a great question, which is how to make sure that what we come out with in the end is a reflection of the whole community and not just a few, I will say a noisy few that are that come to all the meetings. There's an old saying about politics that is whoever shows up gets to decide. And we have to push against it a little bit and say, who is it that's not showing up that really should be weighing in? And what can you do in your outreach process to recruit more of them? And there are a couple of reasons why that's important. First, it means you redouble your efforts or triple your efforts to reach traditionally underrepresented communities, so that this really is, a plan that's done with a strong equity lens, and the code is done with an idea that's going to affect everybody. So you don't want to hear from just one class of people, one group of traditional civic activists, or one group of noisy developers and their lawyers, or that kind of thing. So that's the first part of it. And then next, I'd like you to visualize a pyramid of public participation, where up at the very top of that pyramid is the group you probably call the usual suspects. They come to every hearing or every meeting. They are very involved publicly in community activities and civics, and they read every agenda. They question your every move. They read all your emails and read every newspaper headline, and they're very involved. And that group is really helpful, because they tend to be super knowledgeable. They know all the institutional history. They know what happened 10 years ago and that kind of thing. So we can learn from those usual suspects at the top of that pyramid. But it's a really small percentage of the people in the town as a whole. And one problem with the usual suspects is that they can tend to show up with their mind already made up based on, habits or preconceptions. And it can be hard to get them to think about things in a new way. So that's the downside of it. At the bottom of this pyramid is the vast majority of your population. And it's fair to say, that even if you reach literally hundreds of people through this process, which would be great, there will still be thousands of others who didn't participate because they trusted you as the common council to keep a close eye on it, or they were busy. You know, maybe they're working 2 jobs, or they have are homeschooling kids, or there's a game on, or soccer practice. There's a lot of reasons why many of the people in your town will not come participate in this. But you want them to be confident about it and aware of it if they're aware of what's going on in the community. So that there again, the public outreach has to do a lot of information sharing. Now, in between these 2 groups and here's the point of that pyramid, is a group of people who will participate that don't usually. And they will come if they feel like it's what I call the historic moment in the life of the community. And if you can reach that group, they're really valuable because they're new participants. They're not going to come to every meeting for the next 10 years. They're not going to come if they feel like showing up doesn't make a difference or they're not being listened to. But if they do come, they probably are new to this and will be open to new things, will bring a fresh perspective to it. And they may be younger. These are all reasons why reaching that group in the middle is valuable for a process like this. So as you think about how to promote it, how to brand it in the community, how to talk about it in the newspaper or with your voters, try to think about that group. And if we can reach more of them, a few dozen more, a few hundred more through this process, it'll be a lot healthier.
I don't like to think of them as voters, but as taxpayers and constituents. So
yeah, citizens is a pretty good term here.
Yeah. So can you just walk us through the process of what the document that you would produce that we then would have to pass as the legislature? Are you going to just are we going to have it delivered to us by Gridix, or what is this? Can you just walk us through the steps of what's going to happen as you give us the final document that needs to be approved by the council?
I mean, you want to talk about the deliverables at each stage?
Sure. So it would be both. We would have a traditional code document as well as it would be integrated into the online platform. So the cool thing about the online platform again is it has a map, and you can go directly to your site and click on it, and it brings up all the so it's it's more interactive, kind of easier to explore. But there will still be a printed code document as well if that's preferred people to way for folks to read through it.
Right.
So it's an ordinance passed by you.
Right. So to get it passed, what's the process that you'll be delivering to us?
You mean the approvals process?
The final document.
So maybe I'm just not understanding.
It'll be a Word file or a PDF file with all of the text and any graphics.
So what is the process for you getting us the final document to be approved?
Okay, I think I understand the question. Yes, as we generate drafts, we will post them somewhere for everyone to review. So you can, we'll put them on the website. That's usually the best place because people can easily find it. We try to put it in a format like Joe described that they can read on their phone or their tablet or computer. And then you make printed copies available of that as well for people who might not be using a lot of technology. And then, so it will come to you in the form of a draft. Everybody, it's a transparent process, kind of like cooking in a kitchen where everybody can see you cooking. We'll have a draft, and then we'll be getting feedback on the draft. And so we'll open a method for public comment for the city staff comment, for your own comments. The city attorney will have a crack at it, to steer things that they are or aren't comfortable with. There are parts of this that are typical and non-controversial and not necessarily all that innovative. And then there are other pieces of it that you might be able to do more than one way. And that's where all the attention will go. Not the routine stuff, but all the attention will go there. The PACE Land Use Law Center will be working on the draft before we post anything. So they will already be taking New York State planning law into account. We've worked back and forth with them on several previous projects. So that's a really easy way for us to get it in a really good shape before we post it. Once we've got all the the comments and questions and some clear direction from the administration about what to alter, we'll revise it. And now it's legislation. It's draft legislation. Comes to you in the form of an ordinance to be passed or a bill. And you, as the elected leaders, will in the end give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. And I'm sure you'll have a vigorous debate among yourselves about the little details. Those things you can do more than one way. And
Right.
we'll work with you on that and then post the revisions.
Right. And so then how do you, like you were saying to Alderman Davis, that you're expecting us to be the cheerleaders and to get the community on board with this, but
Well,
we're
I
also
hope you
in the
will.
middle of an election year. So I'm wondering if you've taken that into account. And
Well, I don't want to overstate the case here. And cheerleaders maybe sounds a little casual. I think it's law that you're passing that or not passing that will affect the lives of the people that you represent. And so you'll need to take it seriously. I think your constituents will be watching to see if you're asking questions, and and what those questions are. I think in the end there's always a revision process that causes some things that initially sounded right to drop away because they're not doable. Local governments adopt the codes they can actually adopt in political reality, just like developers build the projects they can actually build in financial and regulatory reality. So while we're idealists and we love cities and we have all kinds of ideas we like to bring out as they come to us about how to help you get it just exactly right. In the end, the final product will represent some kind of compromise among yourselves about what the rules ought to be. And if we get it right, it'll last another 58 years.
Anything else, Michelle?
no, that's it. Thank you.
All right, I'm just going to invite Jeffrey Ventura-Morel. Do you have anything to add, ask, extend here? Because you were on the committee that did the search.
Yeah, thank you, Rainey. I don't have any questions. Everybody has asked great questions, so I think, yeah, just thank you for coming.
Great.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Sue Cahill, anything that you would like to add or comment on at this point? Our city planner.
I did have one question with the process. You would also be integrating the seeker process with your work that you do for the city. I don't know who to.
That's right. So that's one of the items that the LaBerge group, since with their experience in New York, and we would be relying on their assistance on that.
Good.
What flashed into my mind when Tony asked the question earlier about the number of days it would take was seeker, because as we all know, once you start, it can take a while to conclude. So, we'll work with LaBerge to get across the finish line as fast as you can do it.
Dan Gartenstein, our city corporation.
With seeker and making the seeker determinations is part of, I'm sorry, it's Dan Gartenstein, I'm Assistant Corp Counsel. Following up on Sue's question, compliance with seeker and making the required findings is something that is or is not covered by the RFP. Is that something that you would be doing, or is that something that is outside of the scope of the proposal?
Amy, you're muted.
Sorry, the original RFP did ask for, asking for, I think it was, I'm trying to find the exact language here, the approval process, the development of a local type 2 list, I think. So there's, certain specific requirements that were requested in the RFP, and that's what our team is anticipating providing. I'm sorry, I don't know if you're still there. I think your camera went off.
Yeah, my camera, that doesn't really answer the question, but I guess what you're indicating is that whatever is specified in the RFP is what you're going to do, and you're not really clear with regard to how much of the secret process is covered by the RFP.
So I'm just looking, I'm sorry, it's been a little while since we had this conversation with LaBerge on exactly what they were doing. And so I'm trying to find, so I do know that they, they're specifically are, assisting with exactly what was requested in the RFP. And again, if I find it while we're chatting here, I can give you some more information. I think there's some more information in the proposal. I'm just trying to find the exact in our scope.
Suffice to say, Dan, we will get a more satisfactory answer for that good important
Well, and I
question.
assume that's what Sue is asking as well. Correct, Sue?
Yes, that's what I was looking for.
Because as the planning director, I assume Sue would prefer that a final document not be dropped in her lap and her being told that her planning board now has to start seeker. Alternatively, that the council then has to start seeker, which is potentially another drawn out process that they are not prepared to undertake.
Okay, that's very clear.
All right, good. Any other questions or comments for Victor, Joseph, or Amy? Anything else from members of the committee here? Great. Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate this. We appreciate the presentation. We appreciate the care that you put into the proposal. So it's time for us to talk amongst ourselves. And I'm sure we'll have, some more questions as we go along. So I'm hoping that you'll be available if we need to ask anything else a little bit later.
We're here.
Days, no, I mean, not later tonight.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks.
Take care, y'all.
Take care and good night.
Yeah.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Likewise.
All right. Do we have a motion to consider? Don Tollerman makes the motion. Do we have a second? Steve Shabbat has seconded. Great. All right, discussion.
I just have one thing. I don't have the agenda up on me. I could not bring it up. So could someone please and tell me what this proposal or request is for? What is it actually verbiage?
Yeah, the basic request is for the money to purchase the service.
And how much is it? What does it cost? 500,000?
Yeah. Right. And John Toohey has recommended, if we do decide to do this, that the best process for paying for it would be to bring it out of fund balance. Can you tell us, John, what the reasoning is there for spending it, purchasing it out of fund balance?
Sure, Rennie. First off, I see where we have three options, right? We have contingency, we have fund balance, and we have bonding. Take the first one, bonding. If we were to bond this item, it would be paid for over 5 years. It's a relatively short-term asset. I think when we wrap up the 2020 financials, we'll be in a position where we have to evaluate our fund balance levels. Typically, these 5-year assets are what we would look at. So first off, this is, considering its short-term use, and there appeared to be a question, Tony.
No.
Okay. So I wouldn't recommend bonding for a few reasons. A, it's short-term, it's 5 years. You're gonna have to work it into your budget over 5 years anyway. It is consulting work with no tangible asset at the end. Therefore, and once again, based on the fund balance levels, I think we're going to have to do something with the fund balance at the end of this year anyway, when we wrap up our 2020 financials. And this would make good use of that fund balance. The reason why I wouldn't recommend contingency is because of the level of contingency. This would be a pretty significant draw on contingency for 2020 this earlier in the year. We have unsettled labor contracts and other expenses that should be considered as part of that contingency balance. And, the fund balance is there. I've reported to the council, what those numbers are. They're in a monthly report. So, we're above our max. We're above right now our targeted range. And this would keep us in a good place with fund balance.
And plus, as I think we'll hear later, we've just gotten extremely good news from the Saving America, the America Rescue Package from the federal government. Tony, do you have a question?
Yes, my question is, we're having a discussion part right now, correct? And
yeah, this is discussion, and then we'll lead to a vote.
Yep. And my thing is that do we consider maybe starting off with a certain part of the city in this in regard, since it's a large price tag, and what is a thought process there? Can we do this in piecemeal? And I mean, as Michelle asked them questions about the price tags of other municipalities, and their statement was, or their comment was, that it wasn't as big of a scope and it was in certain parts. So I'm not sure if this is something that we have to do all at once. And is it better to do it all at once, or can we do it in small certain areas of the city?
Dan Gartenstein.
You can't chop up the bid. This is the result of an RFP. The vendor has indicated that they are willing to honor the prices that were quoted as a result of the RFP. If you're looking at a smaller scope of work that is dramatically different than what was bid out, you would have to go back out to bid.
Okay, thank you.
Steve Shavit, then Don Tollerman.
Thank you. I don't want to put words in John's mouth. John seemed to indicate that, it looks like we should be spending down some of this fund balance. Is this an amount that we have in mind to spend down, that we should be spending down this amount of money, or is it a larger amount, smaller amount? Can you elaborate on that a little bit, John?
Yeah, sure, Steve. Well, first off, we haven't finished measuring the fund balance level as of December 31st, 2020, but certainly this $500,000 would, even spending this, would still put us above our targeted thresholds for fund balance. But typically when we come to the council and we give the fund balance levels and we talk about, how are we going to get that fund balance back in range within the targeted levels, usually the council's plan has been to either pay off debt or fund capital on a pay-as-you-go basis. So this would be funding otherwise capital work, which would have been funded by bonding on a pay-as-you-go basis. So this would be one of the typical avenues that the council would use fund balance for.
All right, Steve. Don Tollerman.
Thanks, this is Don. I consider this to be one of the most important things that we do for our city. There's aside from spending the money, we have to remember how much money this is going to save us, because we spend endless time and expertise spinning our wheels trying to figure out the current zoning, making workarounds. This is our infrastructure and our blueprint for our future, and I just don't think that there's any better way to use our fund balance than for this project. So I'd like to make a motion. That we move ahead, but Dan has a comment.
Go ahead, Dan.
And I'm reluctant even to say this, given that I have been the one who has been pushing this pretty much more than anybody, and I'm the one, along with Sue, who deals with our current defective code. But without a clear answer to the seeker question, I am really concerned about you going forward with a vote this evening. Completing a seeker on a document and a proposal of this size is a massive undertaking. And the idea that we are not clear at this point as to whether or not they are handling the seeker but whether or not that's going to be dropped on us once this document is completed seriously concerns me. I don't know if Sue is still there. Sue?
Yes, I'm here.
And can you speak to that as well and just describe what the secret process would entail if this was not specifically included in the RFP and we were charged with doing this ourselves?
It would be a very lengthy, in-depth process. I mean, you would have to, establish, as you have, you're familiar with the lead agency. You would then go through a very lengthy process. You'd have public hearings on it, which we would simultaneously follow along with the development of the document itself. There would be components that are done simultaneous, but in the end, you would have to develop a whole set of findings, and that would describe the entire process in great detail, go through all of the elements of the process itself, and then ultimately you would be adopting a declaration of environmental significance. And it is a lot of work to do that. And think back, those of you that were involved with the comprehensive plan project, that the secret process, how that occurred during the course of that comprehensive plan development. All of those records become part of your ultimate findings. So it has to be initiated early on and follow through alongside, and ultimately the two will come together in a single, or in one decision, seeker, and then the follow-up decision for your adoption.
And Sue, do you recall with the comp plan whether or not the seeker was handled by the consultant, or whether we did it internally contemporaneously with the consultant developing the plan?
It was done by the consultant, and obviously this with the city's input as well.
And that was my recollection as well.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. So we'll hold on to that. Michelle Hirsch.
First, I just want to say that I, agree that our zoning needs to be simplified, that it's very confusing. I've been going through it a lot myself. I find a lot of redundancy. I find a lot of, issues in it. So that I'm not disputing. I just am very concerned about spending $500,000 on a consultant who will deliver what John Toohey just said is not a tangible asset, right? And it's something that then this body will have to vote on, and there's potential that it may not be adopted. So that's $500,000, potentially down the drain. I'm concerned about how did they describe it? Reaching the middle people. And we're not even back in City Hall yet. I don't think that this is a process, and the public engagement piece should be on Zoom. And I think we need to wait and see when we're going to be back in City Hall, when we're going to be back holding meetings and hearings, in person. It's just, even if it's just another couple of months, I think that we need to hold off on passing this.
Tony Davis.
Tony Davis here. And as it has been stated, it's been over 50 years since since Kingston has revised their zoning code. We all are in agreement that this needs to be revised. And so it seems like when we get to this point, that is always, something we've been calling for, we've been preaching for a long time, if you want to say that word, about that we need to change the zoning code. And, and then now the price tag is too high, et cetera, et cetera. I am in agreement that we should, if we're going to get in community input, not everybody's going to be able to be due to Zoom. And I just don't know when we're going to be back into City Hall. we would all love for it, or all like to have it, you know, in a couple weeks, but we're not sure with that. And so, you know, this might be extended out for some time again. I mean, you know, the data shows, and the information I've been hearing is that, you know, we're probably looking to September again, and before we can even think about getting back to any normalcy. And so if this is not an urgent thing, and I mean, I heard Don talk about that this is, you know, one of the, you know, most important things he thinks, and I'm not saying I believe it's the most important two things. I think that we need to make these changes, this from what we're seeing here, because every time some development comes up or somebody wants to do something, it always comes down to, can you do it? It's the zoning. The zoning code is all, you know, messed up, and it's no transparent. It's nothing, you know, easy to do. And so, you know, I would like for this to be done, but again, I'm with, you know, Dan and Sue and Michelle, and that if the seeker project thing, if we don't have that information on who's going to do that, or if they're going to do it, does that mean now the price is going to be more and that they're going to add on? I'm not sure if that was in the RFP. I mean, so, and the questions that's being brought up now, and if they're going to do it, and if they're not going to do it, then does that mean now we would have to go out and we would have to pay more money to them in order for to do this on top of the RFP? And do we have to do another new RFP? And so there is still some major questions. And so I would be, you know, with you know, Michelle and them, and holding off on this vote and until we can get some more answers clarified. Thank you.
And are you responding directly to Tony there?
Yeah, I am confident that they will be able to answer that question, you know, quickly. And certainly if you get an answer back that, you know, assures us that the seeker review is part of their RFP and they are going to, you know, shepherd the city through it rather than, you know, leave that for the council to do themselves or Sue to do themselves. You know, you can certainly address it at a special finance meeting before, you know, before caucus for April. But that is a significant question, and you know, I think you need an answer to it.
Good. So yeah, I think we'll wait for that answer. Hopefully they can get that to us soon. But I would like to note too, they said specifically in the presentation that they can develop the overall project in stages. So we would be able to discuss with them, you know, our concerns about the kind of outreach, the mode of it, whether it's partly online, all online, partly in person, all in person, what have you. They sounded like they were ready to work with us in terms of meeting our concerns along those lines narrowly. I got Steve Shabbat, then Don Tollerman, then Michelle Hirsch.
Thank you. Now, are you aiming to put this off until we get the RFP more in line with what we want? Is that where we're going? I mean, my comments were going to, you know, kind of coincide with Tony and Michelle, that, you know, after listening to it, it seems like public buy-in is a huge part of this project, and getting public buy-in on Zoom, I don't think is an effective way. If memory serves me right, this is where we got the last time we discussed this, the uncertainty of you know, how we're going to present this information to the public. You know, we're really still in the same spot that we were last time we discussed this. You know, so I would prefer that we wait on this. You know, we've been waiting for a while for this. You know, everybody understands there's some problems, but we want to get this right. You know, I would rather not rush into this. You know, let's wait until we can do public hearings until we get the RFP where we want it. So those are my feelings on it.
The RFP's done. Dan?
Yeah, the RFP is where it is. It's not a matter of adjusting it for it to get to where we want it. There was an RFP sent out. This was the vendor that was selected. We can't be tinkering with it or tailoring it at this point to, what you're talking about without going back out and giving other vendors an opportunity. Again, this vendor indicated they are willing and able to honor the bid that they made that was awarded. What I'm speaking about more is just clarification of how much of the secret process is included in the RFP. In the proposal that they generated that was awarded, and how they see their involvement in secret going forward. My understanding from conversations in terms of the Zoom meetings versus the in-person meetings is that if you decide to move forward, and whether that be in April or May, there is going to be a period of time, prior to when the meetings actually begin, when they are going to have to become familiar with our current code and come up with a game plan. And that process is probably going to take 3, 4, 5 months anyway. And by then, God willing, we're, moving back towards in-person meetings anyway. If you delay movement on this at this point until we know when in-person meetings are going to start, you're potentially kicking this out until, 2023, 2024, because they're not even going to start familiarizing themselves with our current code until, into the summer. For all the obvious reasons, that much delay is not something that, is recommended.
Yeah, so there's already been significant delay in terms of accepting this proposal or not. So Jeffrey, did you want to speak directly to that issue?
I was just reminded, thank you, Rennie. I was just reminded by one of the members of the task force that during the interview process, the seeker question did come up. And the answer was that Lil Burge, the law firm that Dover Cole has subcontracted to do legal work, will help navigate the seeker process, but maybe Amy and Victor can clarify that if they're still on the line.
Yeah, or yes, soon. Good, thank you. Don Tollerman?
Thank you. So given what Jeffrey just shared, why couldn't we approve this subject to confirmation of the seeker before it goes to the council? Confirmation, of course, we confirm the seeker process is covered by their law firm. I'm hearing we shouldn't jump into this, we should wait. As far as I know, this has been a conversation for years. And, there's a consensus that it's holding our city back in so many ways. Just even, I wish we had done it prior to Broadway, because the money we're spending on Broadway probably would have been done a little differently if we had our code had been reviewed and redone. I just think that waiting, pushing it back again, is just not the right posture, not the right way to go. I think we should push forward tonight and contingent on clarification on the seeker question. And then if they are covering it, then to take it to the council.
Good. Tony Davis, then Sue, I think wanted to speak to that, and then Michelle.
But I think Michelle was before me. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Michelle, then.
Yeah, hi, thank you. And then the other thing was the yearly fee for grid locks, that program. I would like to know that as well.
Okay.
I don't see that delaying this one more month is, horrendous to wait. If we've waited this long until we just have clarification on all of these answers. We just got the, presentation this evening, so.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. Tony Davis?
Yes, I believe that we should get confirmation in writing and that they're going to be able to do the secret. And if that's the case, and before the next council, we can have a special finance meeting and to pass off this so that we're not moving it. It's not going to be any difference between now and into the beginning of the month. And so that I believe that we need to get that confirmation in writing in regard to the seeker. And if that's the case, if they can do it, then I'm all for this. Again, this has been over 50 years and everybody's stating and that the zoning needs to be changed. And if that's the case, and we do start, as Dan has stated, it's going to be some time before we get even into public discussion or getting public comment on this. So hopefully, and COVID's over with and we are back in City Hall. But if not, if the worst case scenario, if we was to start in the process and we were still in COVID, we could still have Zoom meetings. But as the partners have stated, this council would be able to state, do we want to go fast? Or do we want to go medium, or do we want to go slow? So we would still be able to pull back the realms and say, okay, we are not out of COVID yet. Let's slow down a little bit because we want to be able to have people come in person and give their comments. And it might have to slow it down some and before we go to any other further steps. But I am in agreement that we need to move forward with this, as Don stating, as Jeffrey stating, but I believe that we need to get this confirmed in writing. And then if that's the case, if we can't get that into writing today, then we just hold a special finance meeting. If we get that information, that we can pass it and prior to caucus and at the beginning of next month, and we move forward. Thank you.
I'll note we already have a special finance committee meeting scheduled for March 31st, so we could add it onto there. Sue, then Michelle.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Michelle's comment about the tangible, what you get long term. And I know, I think the tangible piece is that you have a document that embodies a vision and that will result in, actual quality development, good economic development that's going to be produce, bring people, bring dollars, and that I think the economic factor is the tangible good in the long run that you're going to get.
Yeah, and I think there's a whole series of really important elements here, which have to do with bringing a lot of different folks in the community together. We have lots of folks who are really interested in talking about development. And so I think the project by project approach creates all kinds of difficulties, not just in terms of zoning, but in terms of how we understand the process. And I think that this is something that would help to smooth that process and really bring us into a much closer alignment and have a greater sense of the expectations going forward. And I think that's another dilemma, is we've got a lot of different community ideas about the expectations. And this is a way for us to bring those together and bring the community together as well. John Toohey? I'm sorry, Michelle, then did you have something else to say, Michelle?
No, I just wanted to state in response to Tony that their proposal says that the public engagement piece would be between month 2 and 5.
Yeah, but we do have some control over that once we purchase the service, from what they were saying during their presentation. So, 2 and 5, we could move it back a little bit from what I understood. John?
Thanks, Ronnie. Yeah, and I just want to clarify the tangible versus intangible. It's more of an accounting type question, or comment. When I say tangible, I'm talking about a physical asset. In terms of intangible, I'm referring to this is planning type work, and normally when we're doing planning, engineering, design type work, that's all bonded over 5 years. So just to clarify that comment.
All right. Good. Jeffrey?
I just wanted to point out one thing, that this last year, because we're using Zoom, our public engagement in meetings has been much higher than it's been the prior 2 years that I've been on the council when we were not using Zoom. So I don't think Zoom is a deterrent to participation.
Sure. And from what I understood from them to say is that we can negotiate with them and consider their expertise, their experience, as well as our experience, and find a common ground there. All right, anything else then on this particular issue? So we'll not hold a vote. I think we need to get this information, but we can put this on the agenda if we're able to settle this issue in the next week, and then put it on the agenda for the March 31st meeting. Tony?
My question was, do we have to vote on that we're tabling this? Is it considered a table? Do we have to vote on that to do that? Or I thought
no, we're just not acting on it tonight. In essence, we're holding it open.
Okay, I didn't know if we had to take a vote on that. That's all.
Yeah, so it would appear then on the next agenda as old business.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so I'm taking everybody's ready to move on to the next issue. Yes. Okay, that's going to be the report from John Toohey about our economic financial situation at the moment.
Thanks, Rennie. Okay, so I emailed everyone earlier today an update on the finances as we transition from 2020 accounting into 2021. The reports will change a little bit. The one change you'll see on this month's reports is I've worked in our 2020 revenue highlights into the narrative report, giving you some information on sales tax, the state aid, property tax, parking, etc. Most of which we've already covered. Sales tax did finish for the year 2020, just over $21,000 over the prior year and $312,000 over budget. So we did well with sales tax. Also, as part of the report, I gave you an update on the sales tax on 2021 year to date. We've only received 2 payments. Year to date, that's a little off. So we're comparing pandemic versus pre-pandemic revenue. So I would expect, there would be some differences, but we'll continue to monitor that as we go. So not a lot of other pandemic related information to report other than I did send everyone out an email earlier today regarding the local aid in the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Not sure how many of you have had a chance to look at that. The city of Kingston, upon enactment of this legislation, would be scheduled to receive $18.6 million of federal aid. It's a large number. Hold on one second. I'm just checking everybody out. I'm going back and forth between minimizing my screen and looking at my everyone here. But so we're still trying to work out the details, right? But essentially, the way it would work is the city would get 50% of that aid within 60 days of the president signing the bill, with the remaining 50% coming a year down the line. We've been talking internally about this, but obviously this is going to be a huge topic of conversation in the near future, and for a considerable amount of time.
And John, we're still waiting to understand the parameters of how we can spend that money.
Yeah, I mean, there's some preliminary information, but there's not a lot of details at this point. But it certainly there's going to be compliance requirements. That is certain. If you click on the link, the NICOM link I sent you, there's a preliminary summary of the key provisions that you can take a look at, which explains in general what the funds can be used for. There's not a ton of detail there. There's also a link that gives you the exact dollar amount that was targeted for the city of Kingston.
And then do we know who's going to administer the funds from the federal?
Yeah, so those are the things that we need to work out. We need to look at what our I would say our capacity is, but certainly it's a big lift, right? I mean, it's $19 million of federal aid that has federal compliance requirements. We've had some discussions internally about how we would administer. I think probably the best bet right now would be to talk to the mayor. I don't want to put anything out that regarding his plans, but certainly I think we have to look at potentially getting some outside assistance and expertise, because there's going to be a lot of eyes on this. There's going to be a lot of compliance requirements. I think there's going to be a lot of invested parties. There's going to be a lot of differing opinions on how you could spend this money, right? I mean, it's a windfall of money for the city of Kingston. There's a lot of potential uses for this money. And I think we should have as much transparency and input as we can in how this money gets spent. It's the largest single influx of money in the city's history, and there's a lot of good that can be done with it. So,
and then do we know which branch of the federal government is going to be sending the money and then looking to ensure that it's spent according to the rules?
We would be getting the money from the
process or the Treasury, or
the Department of Treasury would be sending the money.
All right, thank you.
And they'll send it in 2 equal amounts, 12 months apart. So, with the first one, I would expect that by May we'll have this money.
Okay, thank you, Tony. You had a question?
I think we have to take some relatively quick action.
Okay.
Yes, my question was, and John answered the first part, because I didn't see that the small part, the additional link to see how much the city of Kingston was being allocated. But I just want to state that this is like hitting the lottery and unfounded money. And so I'm hoping that we utilize this money to the best of our abilities and in a wide range of areas and improvements that we're able to do. And as John stated, we might have to get outside things to be able to tell us, the city, how we can spend it and where we can spend it. And if there's going to be any matches or anything like that, again, this is great for the city of Kingston and the people of the city of Kingston. And again, this, hopefully, we allocate this money toward the best of our abilities. Thank you.
Tony, can I just weigh in? I mean, in short, we're going to need a comprehensive plan with a lot of buy-in on how to spend this money. And I think we have to be very careful that we, looking at the compliance requirements of how the money can be spent. Right now, there's some broad categories. There's some information out there on how it can be spent. I'm sure there will be more information that comes down the pipe, but with grants, there's always some interpretation. So this is where my recommendation would certainly be to, look at the compliance end of it as well. So it's a large amount of money. We want to make sure we spend it in accordance with federal guidelines and in accordance with the will of the Common Council and the mayor, and with as much input as we can get to do the right things with it.
Correct. So my follow up to that, and I mean, I'm not sure if we have to spend it by a certain amount of time.
Don't have that information yet, Tony.
All right. So again, if it's possible, and this might be something, that the mayor has done in the past in the city, and with, getting feedback from the community, and if we can get some information out there and, and get feedback from the community, if possible, on where they suggest that this money be spent or allocated to, if that's possible, if we can find out what specific things they can go to, and if there's a deadline, and can we turn around with a survey or something that gives input from the city of Kingston, the people of the Kingston.
Tony, what we had talked about internally, and there's nothing final yet, but some of the things that we had talked about were doing an RFP for a consultant to onboard to help the city prepare an economic recovery plan for the city, right? So that would get all the buy-in. It would do a lot of that work. Potentially the same firm could assist with compliance, et cetera.
Michelle?
So my understanding is that the money was awarded to the city based on the community development block grant formula.
Yeah, I mean, the city's allocation was calculated as a entitlement community. So
Okay.
entitlement communities received more than the non-entitlement communities.
Okay. So I just want to echo Tony and just make sure that this is going to, money to be spent to our most vulnerable population, our hardest hit due to COVID. We're getting this money because of COVID to help people. And we still are looking at and the eviction moratorium ending at some point. So I hope that some money can be allocated to helping people, some more money be allocated to helping with rental, back rent, so people aren't homeless.
Understood, Michelle. I once again, I think these funds, we're going to need as much buy-in from everyone, as much input from, the council, the mayor, the community, to do the right things with this money. I mean, there's different avenues we can go. The question of, which avenue do we go with the money, or which avenues, to what extent, to what amount. There's gonna be a lot of decisions to make.
Right, and I also understand that it was also to help communities that had to stop projects, and I'm not,
Yeah, I mean, if you want me to touch on the broad categories, I'm not going to be able to see it because I'm reading as I'm speaking here. I'll read to you the brief use of funds. A, to respond to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus disease 19, COVID-19, or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, and nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. B, to respond to workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency, providing premium pay and additional up to 13 an hour, not to exceed $25,000 per worker, to eligible workers of the municipality that are performing such essential work, or by providing grants to eligible employers that have eligible workers who perform such essential work. C, for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such local government unit due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year of the local government prior to the emergency. Or D, to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. So
I would be interested in broadband as well, infrastructure, because our, somehow some kind of public Wi-Fi system, since so many kids had issues with Wi-Fi during the pandemic and home instruction.
And definitely we want to be supporting our small businesses and social service organizations, our community organizations, to make sure that they're able to supply their services continually. Good. All right. Anything else for John regarding the economic report there?
Thank you, John.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for getting our name in the hat there, John.
We didn't even have to apply. It was that good.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Then, well, now we're getting to our actual agenda. The first thing on the agenda here is a request from Sue KOHL. This is Kingston Historic Landmarks Preservation Commission securing funding for $35,000 from the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, Historic Preservation, etc. And this will have no financial impact. Sue, can you tell us a little bit more about what this is for?
Yeah, it's the Certified Local Government Grant Program, which the city has done multiple ones in the past. And the New York State Office of Parks, Rec, and Historic Preservation reached out to us, told us that, encouraged us to look at the program again this year. And we spoke with them about possible projects that we were interested in doing. They liked our idea of doing a citywide historic property survey. There have been in the past grants that we have done portions of the city. We've done the Midtown sections, both Broadway East and West have been completed. They were quite a while ago. We'd like to go back and just revisit them and upgrade them. But first, what we'd like to do is really focus on two sections that have not been done at all, and that would be the Pankaki neighborhood area and the Wilbur area. Those are the two that we would like to start with, and then we would revisit some of the other ones that we have done, as well as some other areas in the city that we haven't done. The $35,000 is the amount suggested by the state when we spoke with them. And we will be doing a lot. We have our own commission members that will be doing volunteer work as part of this, going out and doing a lot of data collections. They've already been apprised of, what we would be asking them to do, and they're more than willing to contribute their time and expertise, as well as helping us collect the data. And once we get the data collected, assembling it and submitting it to the state. There would be a consultant that we would seek that is on a list that's approved already by New York State. And I think what we would try and do ultimately is just to identify the historic resources that we have, work to try and assist them and protect them a little bit more than they are, using the new industry standards that are out there. So that's what we're looking to do. It's really just furthering the work of the commission and identifying resources.
All right, any questions for Sue? Michelle Hirsch, then Steve Shabbat.
I just want to say that I'm definitely in support of this, especially since Wilbur is part of Ward 9. And I would really like to see some effort go towards the preservation of the Nathaniel Booth House. I mean, I know we were able to shore it up, but it's just sitting there, and, some work needs to get done on that, definitely. So again, I'm in favor.
Other questions, comments for Sue? Steve Shabbat.
Thank you. Yes, I'm in favor also, and I'd like to make a motion.
All right. Motion by Steve Shabbat, second by Michelle Hirsch. Any discussion? Any discussion here? Without objection, then I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the application? Anyone opposed? All right, good. The next one is also from Sue. This is in regard to repairing damage done when a car rolled over a tree.
Rennie, there was another grant request as well from Landmarks. They might have gotten lumped into one, but there was a second grant request from the National Park Service to through their underrepresented communities grant. And this was, again, came out of the discussion that we had with the state. One of our projects that we were tossing around was to do an overview of the early history of African Americans in Kingston, and with a particular focus in the Pine Street African burial grounds and getting them on the National Historic Register. I don't know if their committee is aware, but recently the AME Zion Cemetery on South Wall Street was nominated and secured, as well as the church on Franklin Street. So both of those locations were recently done, and that's what inspired this, that there isn't a lot of documentation out there. Well, there is a lot of documentation, it's just not all assembled into a cohesive location, and that's what we're going to try and do, as well as get that Pine Street Burial Grounds nominated. And that grant, the state recommended we go for the full $50,000. There is absolutely no local match required. It's a straight grant. However, we do project we'll probably contribute some, so we estimated about $3,000 of local in-kind resources would be used for that, but that would be majority all consultant based.
I do not have a committee report for this. and it's not on the agenda. So
Oh, all right. I did put, they're time sensitive. I did submit both. I don't know.
They are actually both there.
where?
It's actually, you're talking about this one is the historic preservation. They're back to back.
I see the one.
Sue submitted two and they're back to back.
I don't see it though on the agenda. I just see one thing from the planning department. And then I see the letter of February 26th.
I understand it's listed once, but they're both in the packet. If you scroll, you'll see both of them. I'm holding both of them.
Can you give me a page number? Because page 2 looks like it goes with page 3, the resolution. And then page 4 is the tree request.
It should be on the back of page 2. I'm not looking at the computer, so I don't know what the scan looks like. I have the hard copy of what I scanned in.
What, can you read just the first line of what you're looking at?
The City of Kingston Historic Landmark Preservation Commission is seeking to secure funding. Is this the one, Sue? In the amount of $35,000 from New York State Office of Park and Recreation and Historic Preservation.
I thought that's the one that we just did. Because Sue's talking about one in the amount of $50,000, right, Sue?
Right.
That one.
Do you have a committee report?
Oh, wait, no.
Do we want to put this on the agenda for the March 31st special meeting? Because if it's not on the agenda here, there hasn't been time, it hasn't been out there. And since it's not on the electronic version here, I don't know if people in the public would have been able to see it. And that would still get us in under the wire for the timeliness, right, Sue?
Yes.
All right, so can we follow that strategy? Is everybody okay with that? John Toohey?
So it's going to be at the special finance meeting.
Unless John, did you want to speak to this?
I just want to make sure I'm not confused. So I printed out the agenda today. There's number 1 was the request for authorization to file for grant funds planning department. I thought that was the $35,000 item.
Yeah.
And then the second one was the shade trees planning, which there's 2 pages for that, including a committee report. There's a third item?
Yeah.
I'm confused. I don't see a third one. I thought it was I thought
Okay.
that was the second one. So can you resend that to me for the 31st?
Yes, I will do that. They both went out on the same day, so I'm not sure where they ended up, but I'll resend it. And if you can take it up at on the 31st, that would be terrific because it is time sensitive.
Yes. Tony?
Can we have discussion on this or we have to wait?
We have to wait.
Okay. All right. I'll wait until the 31st then.
Okay.
Are there any particular questions that you want me to look at before the 31st?
I just had a question. I didn't hear what it was in regard to and the funds. So that's
Okay.
what I was asking for.
All right, I'll share the communication.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. All right, then. So we'll move on then to the request to move some money to take care of the destroyed tree.
Yeah.
It's also Sue Cahill.
Right. It's basically an even. We got an insurance recovery from the individuals that created the damage. And we have just gone out to bid. We got bids back, so we're ready to enter into the agreement. This is just allowing us to put the money in the budget for the expense and the revenue.
Okay, good. All right, Steve Shabbat. Oh, I'm getting a. All right, and Michelle. Steve Shabbat makes the motion. Michelle Hirsch seconds. Any discussion? If there's no discussion, then without objection, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. John Toohey.
Just a quick comment. The item, Sue, you just talked about the $50,000 grant, correct?
Yes.
Right. That's the one. Just so everyone knows, that's the one that was not in the packet.
Right.
So the last grant that you really didn't speak to, right? For 35,000. That's the one that was in the packet.
Yes. Yeah, we passed that.
Okay, that's when you passed, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right, but you got the communication for the 50, right?
I that was in your email originally.
Yeah, right.
I just don't think it made it to the because
Okay.
it didn't make it to the committee agenda.
Okay.
All right then. Everybody clear where we are? So I think that's it for you then.
Yes. Have a good night.
Go get some supper.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sue.
Bye-bye.
All right. Next item here. Next two items actually are for retirements in the Department of Public Works. These are payouts for retirements. Any discussion on the first one here? This is standard operating procedure. If not, then motion to consider. Steve Shabbat gives us the motion to consider. Michelle seconds. Any discussion? All in favor then? I'll call for the vote. Yes. All right. Item number 4 is also a payout for retirement from DPW. Let's see. I've got 2 seconds. Who made the Michelle? I'll put you first this time. And Steve Shabbat is the second. If there's no discussion, without objection, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Item number 5 is a transfer in the comptroller's office. And there's no overall impact on these. John, you want to tell us anything about this request?
This is just really a ministerial type transfer we do every year to balance out the employee benefit accounts. You'll see there's one for the general fund and there's one for the sewer fund, neither of which have an economic impact.
All right. Motion, Michelle Hirsch. Second, Steve Shabbat. Any discussion? Without objection, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Any opposed? Same goes for number 6. This is for the sewer fund that John just explained. Get a motion from Tony, second from Michelle. Without objection, I'll call for the vote. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? All right. The last item on the agenda we covered first. So anything else anybody wants to say? I want to thank definitely John Toohey for all the work you put in here, John. We're excited about
So we have a
news that you had for us today.
Really,
Tony
what
Dave,
time's that special meeting on the 31st?
I'm pretty sure we set it for 6:30.
Okay.
You remember off the top of your head?
Again, I might not be there, so I'll have to find somebody that's spring break. So
Okay.
yeah,
Going to
so I
Florida,
might not
Tony?
be around. Excuse me.
You going to Florida? Spring break?
We have a house in Florida, but I got the quarantine for 4 days before I come back. But as of right now, but I might be out of town. If it's not Florida, it's Jersey. All right.
Okay, well then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Tony Davis, second by anybody. All right, Michelle Hirsch, all in favor? All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
See ya.
Good night, thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you, Lisa.
Have a good night.
You too.